This podcast is part of the Listen Frederick Podcast Network. To learn more, visit listenfrederick.com.
The Fedora Files.
Hello, I'm Gregory Fedora, and this is the Fedora Files. Welcome. So glad you could join me today. Today I'm going to delve into some mythology and some stories. We're going to look at mermaids. It's summertime, so at least when I'm recording this, it's summertime. When you listen to this, it may not be summertime, but maybe somewhere in the world it is summertime, depending where you are. If you're in the southern hemisphere, it could be summertime or wintertime. You know, that's how the earth works. But anyway, mermaids are interesting to me because the evolution of them, whether or not you really believe they exist or not, I'm not going into that aspect of it, because I know people say they spotted mermaids. I mean, throughout history, people have talked about mermaids. Christopher Columbus recorded seeing mermaids. The Spanish recorded when they discovered Florida mermaids. Ponce de Leon said he saw a mermaid. Sir Francis said he saw mermaids. Sir, not Saint Francis. But different sailors, well-renowned ones, pirates, buccaneers, pirateers, they all claimed at some point to see mermaids throughout history. But they were never like good. And I think it's interesting that the transformation of the mermaid from terrifying beast and monster to fairy tale princess, it wasn't Disney, it was Hans Christian Andersen with his book, The Little Mermaid. And his transformation of the mermaid from a monstrous demoness of the waters is really how we then got, movies like Splash and then all these other films and TV shows and cartoons and live action remakes of cartoons, is because of him. Pre him, really, mermaids were terrifying. The sailors were terrified of these things. It wasn't like they're like, ooh, a mermaid. Like we've turned it into that where they kind of like, ooh, mermaid. I would love to be the sailor who falls in love. Even in, Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, they did show them as terrifying, but then they also had one falling in love. But that was not the norm. The norm was they were terrifying beasts. Sirens in Greek mythology brought sailors to their dooms. Mermaids pulled sailors under. They believed that, they would pull them in. Like when a sailor fell into the water for no reason at all, they believed it was a mermaid, sucked them in or seduced them in. They were seductresses. They were not something you wanted to delve into. And you didn't want to be around. If you saw a mermaid, it was not a good thing. It was actually a bad omen for many centuries. And a lot of people think that what they saw were like manatees or seals, which then says, they must have been lonely sailors to think that a manatee was a mermaid and being like, wow, she's seductress. And she's like, it's a 400-pound manatee. That's quite the seductress. But I guess maybe back then, people liked, 400-pound mermaids. I don't know. I wasn't there. But it's just, to me, the folklore, the stories, it's interesting to see the transformation, how we view them as beautiful and everyone loves a mermaid. Like there's an industry now of women who are mermaids for parties or perform. Down in Florida, there's the springs where you can see a mermaid show, and there are all these beautiful women swimming underwater like mermaids, and it's really good. They're very talented, but it's not the original mermaids. And I guess you couldn't really have a show for kids and stuff if the mermaids were killing their family and stuff. It would change the whole dynamic. Like, oh, Dad saw a mermaid, got killed. It was a great show. We paid $20 for it. So you can't, that kind of thing can't happen anymore. And when I lived in Florida and like the mermaid industry down there, there is an actual mermaid industry in Florida where, and there's actually a mermaid competition. There is like, it's like the world's best mermaid. I can't remember the name of the competition, but these women go and they perform these almost like dance, but underwater in a mermaid outfit. And so there is this industry. It's pretty interesting that that exists. But to me, it's so fascinating how we took this creature that was once this terrifying beast and turned it into this beautiful thing. And we kind of are doing that again with vampires to an extent. I mean, there's still people who do vampire movies where it's frightening. I know they're talking about doing another Blade movie, which then again, the vampires will be frightening bad things. But Twilight kind of turned it into this, oh, they're kind of, hey, they glow, they're sweet, they can fall in love with a human, and they're tortured. But like, even Anne Rice's books, they are kind of a tortured soul. And some were, some weren't. But I guess they're trying to make them human, but vampires weren't human. And in old folklore and stories, they were not tortured souls in that they felt bad about what they did. They were just evil. And it's just interesting that we as humans kind of do this story, that we like to take monsters and scary things and humanize them and make them almost like, oh, they want to be redeemed, but do they really? Do they want to be redeemed? Do these vampires really? They don't, no, they don't. We want them to want to be redeemed, just like mermaids. Were they sweet, kind, beautiful singers and blah, blah, blah? And I always thought that was interesting with the Little Mermaid. She had a beautiful voice and one of the best singers. And in the mythology, the singing was used to draw sailors to their deaths. And we turned it into, she couldn't use her voice, and such a beautiful voice, and she loved him. But in reality, she would have been drawing Eric to his doom. And, but no, we changed all that. And it's just a cool and interesting thing that humans do, that we like to humanize things and make them be like what we think we would be like if we were that monster. But in reality, the monster isn't like a human. And it's just a mistake we make. To me, it ruins the monster, because I think the monster is interesting in and of itself without needing to be humanized. The monster has its own moral compass, which is askew to humanity. That's what makes it a monster. Now, enough of the mermaid transformation. There's another story that I wanted to talk about. I used to live in Saint Augustine, Florida. I kind of said I used to live in Florida, and with the mermaids stuff. But one of my favorite tales in Saint Augustine is about, took place a long time ago when Florida was under the control of Spain. And if you go to Saint Augustine, there's this ghost story. There's this old cemetery. It's hundreds and hundreds of years old, and it's in town. You're by it. When you go there, there's this, I think it's a oak tree, or it's a tree, but growing out of the center of it is a palm tree. So if you go there, you go down the street, St. George, it's like a street or two over from St. George Street, which is a street that Flagler College is on, not King Street, but it's this other, Apophyla, I think is the name of it. If you go down this street, there's a cemetery. And it's fenced off, you can't go in, it's very old. But as the story goes, if you go there at night, you will possibly see a woman in white. And that women in white stories are always interesting to me because there's so many of those around. But this one is really particularly interesting to me because, as the story goes, a long time ago, there was a captain, and he was in charge of the fort there. And if you go there, there's this old Spanish fort by there in St. Augustine, and it's hundreds of years old. It's a beautiful fort if you get to go there. But so the captain's fort was engaged to a girl, and she was probably like 15, 16 at the time, and she was the daughter of a aristocratic family there in St. Augustine, one of the wealthier families. Well, she ended up getting very ill, and she was engaged to this guy, and they were going to get married. And then he had his own private doctor, but he didn't want to let the doctor take care of her for whatever reason. I guess he was going to marry her out of like duty, as he didn't really love her. Well, she died. And so she was buried in her wedding dress. And supposedly, if you go at night, you can see this woman in white crying, walking through the cemetery in her wedding gown. And that is a story that has always stuck with me. I remember hearing it. I remember going to the cemetery many times to see if I saw anything. I never did. But it was one of those where it's one of those interesting lady in white stories. Because a lot of times you don't get it's the woman in white is like a girl got hit by a car walking down the road before prom or whatever. But this is like this is one of the oldest lady in white stories in America. Because Saint Augustine is one of the oldest haunted cities. It is the oldest city in America of the colonial cities, like not looking at the indigenous peoples and their towns. But the oldest colonial city in America is Saint Augustine, and this is the oldest lady in white story. So there you have it, folks. If you get to Saint Augustine, go check that cemetery out. Go check out the ghost tours there. There's so many cool ones, a lot of fun ones. There's actually, if you just go around, you can pick up a book of ghost stories of Saint Augustine and walk around and see all the different places. Tell them Gregory Fedora sent you. Probably won't get you anything, but tell them anyway. And just check out Saint Augustine. And also, what do you think about the transformation of Mermaid from monstrous demoness of the sea to beautiful Disney princess? How do you feel about that? Is that something that you even care about or not? Well, until next time, remember to stay safe and keep searching.
Fedora.
Check out FedoraCRT.com today.